Hello and welcome back to Inquisitor Martyr. Last time we continued on with our Void Crusade, and we will keep on. We'll go to this one. Okay, just an incursion, that's not bad.
We've detected multiple reality distortion waves near you, Inquisitor. The warp gates are active. I've activated the jello shields to protect the sanity of my crew.
So, between episodes, I ran 2 random gen priority assignments so that I could have, because it gave you a freely distributable attribute point, and I just put it into resilience. You know, one step closer to getting that no self-damage from high warp heat. But I was watching a video by, I think it's Josh Strife Hayes? Yeah. And he was talking to a bunch of, like, other creators, and they're talking about MMOs. You know, he interviewed, like, Asmongold and a bunch of other people who I don't know of. But they're all from varying... Oh, he also talked to, like, Nerd Slayer Studios and Many Kudos and a few others. But it was just talking about, you know, why you don't see as many MMO, like, YouTubers or streamers. And it was interesting, because they do make a good point, but it's something that can be applied to any game. You know, you don't see a lot of MMO people, because a lot of the times, you're either a generalist, and you can do pretty good at that, but you also struggle with the fact that you'll never provide the in-depth analysis someone who dedicates their time to one MMO can provide. But they also have better stability, but they also lose that kind of hardcore player base who would look to them, while the more laser-focused ones run the risk of simply not having anybody to view them. They have nobody to view them if the game dies. You know, if you hitch your horse or your saddle to the wrong horse and you're sitting here, game dies in 6 months. Look at New World. New World, everybody was talking about, big thing. All the glitches, all the problems kicked in. Nobody's around. People lost, 4/5 of their viewer base. And while they're still surviving, they're not doing as good as they used to. And it's a good point. It's something that can be applied everywhere. And there's also, I think, part of the problem they don't touch on is, yes, people are typically going to look for, like, what's going on in the update. And that's kind of part of the problem. You know, an MMO, there's nothing to it. How many MMOs are the same find guy, target lock, roll your fingers across the keyboard to deal all your damage types, wait for cooldowns, roll fingers across keyboard again? Most of them are. The MMO genre really hasn't had anything to shake it up. And people make the argument, they had one guy who's a Warframe creator, and they're like, oh, it's an MMO. I'm like, no. Warframe, at the end of the day, is not an MMO. Because MMO, massive multiplayer online game. Massive. The only areas where you're seeing more than, 3 other people are hubs. Oh, go to Cetus and pick a full server and you're going to find a bunch of people. Yeah, just standing around. Getting missions, buying or selling whatever items they need to the vendors, and leaving. I don't consider that an MMO. To me, that is a lobby shooter. I mean, hell, they don't even have raids. Warframe ditched their raids years ago. I feel like that's part of the problem, The MMO genre is so stale. Oh, I switched to the other staff. That's not bad. But, yeah. So it's this weird situation. And I'm just... that's just my thoughts on it, you know? Nobody's tried to really reinvent anything. Nobody's tried to change the game. I remember when they were talking about New World, this is like Amazon people. They were like, yeah, Jeff Bezos said he wanted like the most streamable MMO. And I'm just sitting there thinking about that, like, these people really don't know what draws viewers in. Because I'll be honest, I don't watch MMO creators. I don't watch Asmongold. I don't watch anybody who plays Final Fantasy 14 or anything. Because it's boring. You know, that's the unfortunate reality. MMOs are boring as hell to watch. You know, part of it is, your role is very dedicated. If you're a healer, you're just targeting friendlies and healing. You don't really get much for damage, and you're typically not supposed to. And as a result, it's very limiting. I think, realistically, if someone wanted to make a new MMO, they'd have to look at games that are massive multiplayer and do something different. Like, great example, PlanetSide. That is one people consider an MMO FPS, and I do consider it one as well. 1,000 players on a server, on a continent? Yeah, that's an MMO in my eyes. I can go to, you know, the Crown or any of these more centralized locations and get into a fight where the measurements of number of players will say 99 plus for all three factions. You know, this little area has 100 of every team just beating each other senseless. I would consider that an MMO. You know, mix things up. Souls games combat. Smaller groups with that kind of style where you can have a role and you can still engage in combat. You actually have more proper engagement abilities than your standard MMO. You know, reevaluate what other games have done. Star Wars Galaxies, prime example. You know, do a shooter or something similar. In Star Wars, you have the capabilities. That's the problem. These MMOs don't evolve. Every other genre has evolved or adapted or improved. MMOs sit around stagnant. Remember the early 2010s? Everybody was making an MMO. You could get an MMO a damn near anything if you had the right connection or if people were already making it. There was just tons of them. And they all died. Most of them. Very few are around anymore. Why? Part because, you know, $10-15 a month for a lot of people is a pretty steep cost. Granted, it didn't really improve things, considering you have, like, the Old Republic, where they say it's free to play, but you're essentially strong-armed into buying stuff. You have to pay. Otherwise, you can't use, like, rare items. There's a ton of restrictions levied upon you. Same thing with Elder Scrolls Online. Another one. Terrible amounts of restrictions. You know, they've really got to just put your nuts in the vice and be like, you should pay us. And it doesn't help. It really doesn't help. It just makes people more resentful of those games. Oh, that's gonna hurt.
We have a tough nut to crack. Our forces are unable to launch an aerial strike on a bunker protected by counter-battery units. You take out the artillery pieces first, then mark the bunker for the expurgation, while I feed you the necessary data from orbit.
Yeah, not liking this 200% damage taken. But I don't really have many options. But speaking about MMOs, like, monetization killed them. Free-to-play games came into the scene, and MMOs just refused to adapt. And it's hard to really sell people on, like, hey, do you want to spend like $60 every year or two on an expansion pack plus pay us $15 a month, so, you know, $180 a year, especially now. Now when you have just all these, all inflation, all this stuff, monetary issues, people are going to start cutting MMOs. So you're really in this weird position. Best option, you follow the route a lot of games have taken. You know, look at Call of Duty. You can just have cosmetic packs, hell, even a battle pass. As much as I hate battle passes, mostly because I think they make stuff just to leave in there, and it's either garbage that no one wants, or it's stuff that's cool, but then it's like, oh, this was limited for one season, now no one can ever have it. Which is actually why I prefer cosmetic packs, because then you can at least buy it at some point. But you know, do something like that. Keep people interested. Things like that are far better than just trapping someone by being like, yeah, it's free to play, you know, wink. You totally don't have to pay anything extra, wink. Yeah, this is gonna be rough. I'm gonna end up probably not being able to finish this whole Void Crusade if the difficulty's already hitting here. But so it's just a problem. And there actually was a 40K crusade planned a good decade ago. Yeah, nothing like bullets that make you hemorrhage health like there's no tomorrow. But it was Dark Millennium. You can look it up. There's very little actually about it. There was interesting stuff because they wanted to have like large-scale battles where players could pilot or drive different vehicles, and there was even Titans. But from what I also saw, they had that World of Warcraft, here's a big ol' hotbar of abilities kind of look, and I don't think that's the way you can go with it. I think genuinely you have to go something like a PlanetSide in an Eternal Crusade style. Oh yeah, this is gonna go so well. I might just have to rush an ending for this whole crusade if we're already hitting this wall this bad. Also doesn't help this guy, 67, if we look at my gear, I mean, the Separatists, a lot of this is actually well within reason. I'm just stonewalled. That might help when I level up, but I actually have to level first. It almost feels like you have to level, like boost the difficulty, level, boost the difficulty from doing more, and constantly try to offset it, but you really don't level fast enough. But with Dark Millennium again, they needed to go in a different direction. Of course, at the time, I don't blame them. 2012, PlanetSide 1 was out, PlanetSide 2 hadn't dropped. Nobody really knew what direction to go. And of course, I've seen people who are like, oh, maybe THQ can bring this back, because it was originally made by THQ, and now we have THQ Nordic under Embracer Group, or I think they are Embracer at this point. But it's like I get the idea, but I don't know who realistically to give it to. Maybe I would say Saber, depending on how they handle making Space Marine 2. But even then, I don't know. I think a 40k MMO, I've mentioned ideas over the episodes that would be quite viable, you know. You could have Imperial Guard classes that let you spawn in AI to fight with you. You could do a good variety of designs and creations. Some areas would be open PvP, some areas would be strictly PvE, having dungeons. The question becomes, how do you balance out a fight? You know, everybody's going to want to get, you know, high-end war gear. So do you make everything temporary? You know, you get a relic weapon or something, some ancient Astartes weapon, and you die, it's gone. It has merit, it becomes very hardcore, but then you would also have basic versions of gear that could, in theory, never run out. But then you'd have to limit resource gains, because if you can buy certain gear, then people will just buy whatever they can, and if there's tons of resources, they'll buy tons of it. So there's a lot of issues. I think it's definitely something someone should look into. You know, it's, like I said, it's an idea with potential. But in the end, we just have to wait and see. 40k, I mean, in recent years has been getting a ton of attention, a ton of games. Warhammer in general. It's just who wants to step up and make the project. You know, I see people mention stuff like, oh, Amazon, they could do it. They're struggling with New World as is, and we've seen good and well. They can pay for as much talent as they want, they still screw it up. And they're screwing up on basic MMOs. While something like a Dark Millennium is a very unique design, or requires a unique design. In the end, it all boils down to who can do it, if anyone. I wish we'd see something like that, because I think it'd be a phenomenal game. I mean, I'm still disappointed that Eternal Crusade failed. The comments on, like, Steam are hilarious, though. The number of people who were like, yeah, I was told this was going to be like a planet-side, and then they just wussed out. And that's what I think is funny, too, is people are like, oh, well, they made Dead by Daylight. It's like, yeah, behavior, when it comes to a studio, to my knowledge, they are a very mixed bag of quality. And even then, I've heard people who are not too happy with behavior and how they've handled even Dead by Daylight. I'm trying to think, like, I know what else they've done, it's just nothing else of note. And I mean, I still can't get over some of the stuff they're higher ups being like, oh, well, if the game can't be done, it's because you didn't give us enough money. It's like, you don't say that. You know, you should have secured more funding in the time you've had. And that was one thing that always irked me, was they seem to be relying entirely on crowdfunding and just seem to not ever bother to look into, you know, a publishing deal until, I'm trying to think, it was pretty late on when I first heard, like, I think it was Bandai Namco being potentially in on the game. It was one of those things where when I heard that, I was like, what, you didn't sign a deal to get money from them? Like, what were you doing? Did you lowball yourself? Which that one wouldn't shock me. I feel like that's such a big issue too, is like people lowballing their own projects. It's like, no, if you need $1 million, I would say shoot for 1.2. You know, get more than you need in case things go wrong. Because chances are, something will go wrong. You know, you're going to need more testing, you're going to need more dev time, you're going to need this, that, or the other thing. But Eternal Crusade also failed, and I would hope a new version of Dark Millennium would not make this mistake. Eternal Crusade was like, oh, we're just going to make every faction we can. You know, oh, here's Orcs, here's Chaos, here's Space Marines, here's Eldar. No. You make 2 factions. You make Space Marines, you make Chaos Space Marines. You make sure they don't suck. You make sure they're done. They get their Terminators, their Paladins, their everything the faction needs, and then you add. You don't sit here and try, you know, piecemealing 4 factions at a time. You know, that's how you get a failed project. Because now you're pulling your art people, you're pulling your programmers, you're pulling everyone in 4 directions. I'm salty over it. That game never should have failed the way it did. And yet, here we are. Years later. And I'm disappointed nobody's really tried to pick up where they left off. Nobody's sat down and said, hey, I think we could do it. Because the PlanetSide guys aren't going to. Flat out, they won't. If it's a matter of, oh, we'll just wait for them. Like a year or 2 ago, there was an interview with one of their head guys, and he's like, yeah, I'd like to do a PlanetSide 3. So if anything, that's where his mind is. He's not looking at expanding into a new IP. He's looking at trying to get enough money and show investors that there's enough need or demand for a sequel. Which admittedly that game needs desperately. It's so horribly imbalanced and the engine's old that it really needs an update and some new stuff to it. You know, there's a lot of issues, and the new mechanics they've added over the years don't mesh with old maps very well. Prime example being building. You know, a lot of these environments were never meant for the construction aspects, and then they're just trying to, like, shoehorn them in, and it's a problem. But I think that's kind of the problem a lot of games feature, or, like, suffer from when feature creep kicks in. You know, you hit a point where it's like, oh, well, we have this new thing, but our old stuff isn't conducive to this. Well, you're not going to throw away the new thing. You're going to just put it somewhere else and hope people don't mess with the old thing anymore.
Hostile unit down. Rinse
Oh, now I gotta find the stupid bunker. I forgot. I was really hoping that would be it.
Electrospectral scanning revealed info fragments of high importance.
I think I have 2 lives left total.
Blessed scanning psalms have been executed and indicate essential info fragments, Inquisitor. Data has been inloaded.
Yeah, and I've been putting points into just like ranged combat since everything is ranged, and I mean, a 3% boost here and there isn't gonna make a world of difference, but I feel like it really needs to at this point. Oh, good. And I mean, this is a bonus mission, which is good to get done, but yeah, we're gonna have to just rush to the end at this point.
And more or less in one piece. That's a success, I guess.
I mean, the level up is nice, but it's gonna be just a rush to wherever. Because let's see, what's this one? Nurgle Infestation, Callous Hunt. That one's probably my better one because it's lower level, but then I just have to cut and run. I can't keep finishing these off. And what I saw, they're like, oh, if you follow the best path, you only have to deal with like 2 level 9 missions. I'm like, level 9? No, I'm struggling as is. But that is all for now. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit the like button. It helps out the channel a lot. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.